Could Rome Odunze be a top 5 pick in the 2024 draft?
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. I'm the site editor over with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. So we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And just a reminder that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers, if you join today, you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Lars, we had to spend a lot of our time on the Monday show talking about some rumors that we'll get into a little bit of today, and the truth or not so truthful, just stuff behind that, but we'll get there because this was something we really wanted to talk about. As shout out to just Lance Zierlein, everybody over at NFL Network, because they've been doing a really great job putting together some mock drafts, all these sorts of things. And one person that you and I are both really big fans of, just not only as a player, but as a person as well, is wide receiver Rome Odunze. And Rome Odunze, in Lance Zierlein's latest mock draft, Lance has him going 4th overall to the Arizona Cardinals. And you and I have talked about Rome as a top pick and, top 10 being basically a lock for him. And now he's starting to move into the top 5. And do you think that not only does he have a chance to be top 5, but could he even maybe overtake Marvin Harrison Jr. in the eyes of the NFL?
I think for Rome, it might be a case where he overtakes some evaluators in the eyes, when it comes to him versus Marvin Harrison Jr. But I do think there's only kind of, it's not a true rationale like when you're pointing at statistics or measurables or anything like that. But you just hear the name Marvin Harrison Jr. or you just hear Harrison Jr. and like, wait, Marvin's kid? Like, how do we not take him? And then you look at the production that both of them had at Ohio State and Washington, respectively. And you think, okay, well, if we're the Patriots and we have the 3rd pick, do we take Marvin Harrison Jr. here? Do we take a quarterback? Do we trade maybe a couple spots?
Take a quarterback.
But my point being that do we take the high end? Because if you're looking at, do we want a quarterback or do we want somebody that can help a good quarterback look great, right? Because for all that Michael Penix was, him and Rome Odunze cooked from the beginning. And this is Michael Penix, who never played more than 6 games in a season in Indiana, right? So It wasn't like this was Caleb Williams and, Rome Odunze linking up at USC where, I wouldn't be surprised if those two were cooking pretty quickly just because both are high-end caliber players. That's not a shot at Penix, but it's more or less just if you just take a natural NFL evaluator's eyes and you think, okay, how does Rome Odunze help our offense? Does he need a Drake May at quarterback to be effective? I think it's pretty clear Rome Odunze can make a pedestrian quarterback good and a good quarterback great. And I think that, and a great quarterback, one of the best in the country, that's what he did with Michael Penix, right? Where you have a very, very good quarterback and you have a receiver that can adjust. The Cal game, I think, is one to me where Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't have that, where I know it's not a big game, but it's that big adjustment that he made that kind of sticks.
So I disagree with you just from the standpoint of Marvin Harrison's elite body control and some of the other things that we've seen him put on tape over the last couple of years. And like, as much as we love Michael Penix and obviously Marv got the same thing with CJ Stroud, but he had to work with Kyle McCord this year, who's just not even the same stratosphere as what CJ Stroud is, which doesn't help his draft stock in a sense. But Marvin, the thing that I think I think that Marvin Harrison Jr. is still going to be picked before Rome. Despite putting everything else aside, personal feelings, whatever else, I'm more curious as to how this draft is going to shape up, because you talk about the Patriots at 3, where and I'm not even just saying this as a Patriots fan, as all the everydayers know. I like to work that. I was going to say bias, but that's not where we're going with this. It's not like I'm complaining about Bill Belichick or anything like that, as I might have last season. But when we look at how the top 5 picks in this draft shake out, the Bears are going to take a quarterback at number 1 if they keep the pick, and if they trade the pick, there's still going to be a quarterback taken at 1. The Commanders need to take quarterback at 2. They don't have a choice. And then it's going to come down to the Patriots, and this is where Lance's mock comes in, because Lance has the Patriots taking Marvin Harrison Jr. at 3, which just makes things really, really interesting. And then that's where Arizona comes in at 4 and says, all right, well, we would have loved to pair Marvin Harrison with Kyler Murray, but let's just take Rome Odunze and do the same thing, where you're going to get a lot of the same thing from the two of them, where Marv might be slightly better as a route runner, but Rome has the contested catch edge, and he does so many different things just a little bit better. And then the biggest thing for me is going to be just what are we going to see Rome test at in the 40-yard dash? And then, of course, the Chargers round out the top 5. So we could see 3 quarterbacks go in the top 3 picks and still see Rome Odunze get picked in the top 5. But right now, the Patriots are the crux of this at 3. Where if we see 3 quarterbacks go back to back to back, maybe this gets a little dicey, where Rome is certainly a top 10 lock at this point, or as close to one as you can possibly get, with, you know, the corners, with Terry and Arnold, with a couple other guys that are in there that seem to be moving around. But I'm really curious to see how this all shakes out for Rome, because this draft class, I don't mean this to sound just slanderous in any way. He picked the worst year to come out, which has nothing to do with him. We're going back to for 2023 was the right decision. It absolutely was. He probably still gets picked in the mid to late 20s in last year's draft, but he just happens to be competing with not only Marvin Harrison, but Malik Nabers at LSU, where there are a whole lot of guys around him where it's, oh, wow, all 3 of these guys could be wide receiver 1 in any other draft class. And they all just decide to come out together. So it's really interesting to see how all this has come together. And I'm just glad to see that Rome is getting the love that he deserved when, you know, coming into the year. And even for a decent portion of the season, it was, no, it's Marvin Harrison Jr. and there's no question about it. These other guys just kind of fill in where necessary. And as the season went along, we were just, no, Rome deserves more love. Put Rome up there, get Rome up there. And he kept creeping up and creeping up and creeping up. And now as we're fully into the swing of draft season, it seems like he's finally there, which is really cool to see.
Right. And I mean, I think the thing that's crazy, if you think, and again, we don't know what Marvin Harrison Jr. battled throughout the season besides the pedestrian quarterback, but if you imagine even a healthier Rome Odunze, just imagine the numbers he puts up. Sure. Now, again, Washington still won, right? So it doesn't matter in that scheme, but Marvin Harrison Jr., or not Marvin, Rome Odunze at full strength, maybe let's just say 80%. Because what do we think he was playing at post Arizona game?
I think it depends on the week, where, you know, we could probably start around 70, 75, and maybe he worked his way back up there.
Right. And so I think, imagine for that, like even more crux of the season, that Oregon game, the Arizona State game, you know, maybe if they have a big game against Arizona State and, you know, don't have that clunker where Mish Powell has to win the game with a pick 6, that the narrative of Washington is different. Maybe Michael Penix doesn't have that drop in the Heisman, and, you know, you just put up video, you can see probably clears 5,000 without without the Stanford and Arizona State game, you know, so that, you know, and again,
no, just Arizona State. He still threw for 300 something at Stanford.
That's true, but if that Stanford game feels different, even though they still won the game, just the feeling and the mood and kind of the messaging around what Washington was putting out, and that impacts Rome, right? Where Rome still at the end of the day probably should have been the Biletnikoff winner. Ultimately still loses out to the namesake, because when you look at the numbers, Rome had the better numbers. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure, at least in most categories, he had better numbers. Now, again, numbers don't mean everything, right? So, you know, Marvin Harrison Jr., to your point, still made all the incredible plays, still kind of ended up being
he's still that guy. None of this is to disparage Mar.
Right, exactly. I think the other thing to consider when you look at Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Rome Odunze is, well, Odunze still had Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan, whereas Odunze did have Emeka but it wasn't the same Emeka that maybe people were expecting coming into the season, right? I think that's probably a fair characterization, and maybe why Ohio State didn't do as well as they wanted to this year. Not the only reason, but maybe one of. And so I think Marvin Harrison Jr. getting all those numbers and targets, hey, he kind of carried that team to a top finish. That's how good he is. He still is that guy, to be fair, though.
So I'm really curious, because I want to see what happens for Rome in this draft, where 3, 4, and 5 are all fantastic landing spots. I'm really curious to see if the Chargers, who took a wide receiver last year, Quentin Johnston, decide to go back to the well and go with either Rome Odunze or Malik Nabers. Personally, we would prefer it to be Rome, but if they go that route and pair him with somebody like Justin Herbert, where that's an odd Washington-Oregon connection there, that would be just such a perfect quarterback wide receiver pairing for not only what Jim Harbaugh needs down there, but just for the future of that offense, because that can unlock so many things with, you know, an aging Keenan Allen, like I said, Quentin Johnston, who just can't really do much of anything. Mike Williams keeps getting hurt, where that would be just really cool to see how that works out. But Lars, as we're just kind of, you know, talking about the NFL, we got to talk about Trent McDuffie. right after we send a message to our good friends over at FanDuel. You can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And I just got to remind everybody, if you're placing any futures bets on FanDuel for the NBA title, you got to go with the Celtics. It feels like the year, and I know I'm going to jinx things, but I think that's the way to go. Lars, we got to record early on Sunday because we wanted to make sure we were able to watch the Super Bowl. And then Trent McDuffie was absolutely fantastic in the Super Bowl. I know Mina Kimes put it out there that, there should have been an argument for Trent to win Super Bowl MVP. I put that out there on Huskies Wire a couple days earlier, just saying, hey, plus 60,000 odds with our friends over at FanDuel. Might as well go place a best bet on that. And I think even though he didn't force a turnover to do anything, that outside of Patrick Mahomes, he might have had the biggest impact on this game for the Chiefs.
Oh, bar none. I mean, I think that's kind of the thing. It's like, okay, he didn't have a turnover, right? But he had 3 pass defenses. He had more PDs than the entire San Francisco defense. So, I mean, I think when you look at what separated the game that ended up going into overtime, he was that guy. And from start to finish, too, it wasn't like he got beat a couple of times early and then saved it late and kind of redeemed himself. It was that first one, I believe, who was it, Deebo Samuel? The
one in the end zone?
Yeah, the one in the end zone. Yeah, that was on the first one. And again, so it's Trent McDuffie going against the best of the best and holding it down. And I remember, and that's kind of the cool thing is for all that Trent is as great of a playmaker, and you think cornerback, you think, Deion Sanders, you think on all these guys that are so flashy and they're too good for everybody else. Trent McDuffie is about as down to earth as a person. I mean, if you're wearing a Patriots hat on the sideline of a UW football game and somebody doesn't slap your and somebody doesn't slap you silly and also still takes a photo with you. I mean, I think, you have to.
Who could that have been?
Again, I'm just saying there may or may not be one person currently sitting to my left that, had that claim. But again, it brings full circle, right? Because Trent's always been that guy, still comes back around. Even was talking about Cam Fab before that game. And so it's kind of cool to see, hey, Trent kind of fell a little bit in the draft. No, it wasn't a top 10 pick, maybe talent-wise. I think certainly is you go back and look at that draft class where it's, okay, there's some decent corners in that class, but don't you think Trent maybe should have gone a little higher in that draft?
So he should have gone a little bit higher. The way that draft fell was very interesting. Yeah. Where when we look at the only 2 corners that were drafted ahead of him, one of them being Sauce Gardner, who he just shared first team All-Pro with this past season. And the other one was Derek Stingley, where it's like, all right, you understand, because both those guys, not only were they the only 2 drafted ahead of him, they're both picked in the top 5.
Yeah.
So you can say what you will about where he slotted in the draft. I'm just personally mad that a team that we will not mention traded out of said pick. And then, that happens. But on top of that, it's really cool to see because we've seen Washington's coaching staff go to work and just vocalize this the best way they can, where we saw Armand Hawkins just saying, hey, Trent McDuffie's awesome. We love this. John Richardson coached Jalen Watson, who's also playing in the Super Bowl right now for the Chiefs. And we saw Dijon Lee get some attention on that. And it's really cool to see how this staff just seems to be selling alumni to a whole nother level, where you love that aspect of it. And then when you look at just Trent's performance as a whole, the PBU in the end zone, the perfect blitz on third down that really does save the game there, where that's all really cool to see. And for a program that, getting good pub, I don't think that that's hard for Washington, but I would say that one that can still use a whole lot of it from time to time, where it's, especially when you talk about the NFL, where it feels like the pro Huskies aren't necessarily as promoted as widely as they should be. Seeing Trent McDuffie, who has a 100% career winning percentage for Super Bowls and plus, years in the league, I think that's pretty cool to see.
So I actually had to take a moment to think about that. Can you say again where Richardson and Watson were playing and coaching at respectively?
Yeah, Washington State.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy to go back in 2021 and think, wow, maybe Wazoo had the better position coach at that point? I don't know. Maybe not. We'll see. I don't know. But again,
position coach, yeah, we can.
Position coach, and also, but again, to be fair, when your head coach is a former defensive backs coach, you don't really have. It's like it'd be like if Nick Saban. I'm not comparing Jimmy Lake to Nick Saban, but it'd be like if the Alabama Crimson Tide secondary was the weak, like there's no way that's happening under Saban. Like there's no way that recruiting takes a dip in that regard.
Yeah, but that's a whole different debate that we don't need to get into.
No, but I do think it is kind of intriguing, and I do agree with your point that, I mean, you always hear on social media the whole pro dogs thing, but I do think, for as much as they talk about Will Dissly, I mean, I remember Travis Feeney being on the sideline. I remember, Jonathan Amosa being on the sideline a number of games. Levon Coleman had a cup of coffee in the NFL. So all these guys, being on the side that want to be around the program, and I do think, and again, we don't want to keep going down this road, but that is one thing Kalen did do well. You got to give him props to that. He went out of got Steve Entman back, got a number of guys that really were like, hey, I'm going to stay way over here.
So that's my point, though, is he did a really good job doing that. And it felt like there's still more to build on is my point, where it's like, oh, yeah, that's cool. You're taking big steps in the right direction. Seeing Lawyer Malloy get involved as he was is always really cool. We ran into Dante Pettis a couple of times on the sideline. There are a whole lot of other guys where it's, he's back too, where that happened a lot. But it still feels like when you look at, because like seeing those guys on the sideline is one thing, right? Where that's always really cool. But finding more ways to get them involved, whether that's through social media, whether that's through, I mean, not necessarily recruiting, but just bringing more of these guys out to practice. It still feels like there's another level that you can take it to in that sense.
Well, and as you say that, there is, you start looking across the college football landscape. What are a lot of programs doing? They're bringing back former recent graduates that didn't really go to the NFL, but were very prominent names in the program. Right? Yeah. You think of the Hawkins, right? You think of a number of guys where it's, okay, maybe they didn't have a career in the NFL that they thought, almost like Chris Steele going back to USC sort of thing. We're like,
sure.
Guys like that where, I'm thinking there's a number of other ones. The Kingston Fernandez of Washington State is one where played there recently, decides to now be involved in player personnel. Justin Glenn was kind of that former player glue guy that I don't know if that role, I mean, I know it has been with Cameron Elisara, right? And he's been doing a great part in that. But again, the more that you can have helping, the better, right? It shouldn't be just on one person to try, one or two people to try and get a bunch of, again, you're in the city of Seattle, right? It's not hard. It's hard to get here in some regard. I get that. But it's not like going to Morgantown, West Virginia or Pullman or Spokane where it's like, hey, we got to go all the way. Right, or Tuscaloosa, right, where we got to go all the way out to the boonies to, find this, there's no direct, I mean, there might be a direct flight into Tuscaloosa, but my point, you got to usually fly into Atlanta or some other place and drive. You're not just flying directly, Seattle to Tuscaloosa unless you have a private jet, which some people do.
Must be nice. But no, and that's exactly, but that's where I'm going is not only do you want to see some of these guys getting involved, but as Jedd Fisch continues to push this 33rd NFL team, which we've seen used on social media, and we've seen some of these other things, this is exactly what needs to be highlighted. When Trent McDuffie, a first-team All-Pro, goes out and does exactly what he's supposed to in the Super Bowl on the biggest stage and is just getting all this public attention, like that's exactly what you want. That's exactly what you're looking for. So seeing more of that going forward would be really, really interesting to see what Jedd wants to do with that, right? Where this is going to be a big year for that in particular, just to kind of tie it back in with talking about Rome and everything is, yeah, we're not going to see Rome and Michael Penix and Jalen McMillan, all those guys on the sideline probably at all this season, because hopefully, they're out playing in the NFL, doing all that sort of stuff. But being able to bring those guys in on their bye week, bringing them in, maybe at some point over the summer or in the winter to talk to guys, maybe, at the pro day, something like that, where they're still going to be around in a certain capacity, and just making sure that what Kalen did, exactly to your point earlier, to keep these guys involved and just say that door is always open. And we've already seen Jedd Fisch start that, where he held a conference call with every alumni that he said wanted to attend. And I know you and I both heard that there were a whole lot of alumni that did decide to attend, and they all left feeling very positive about everything that there was to say about Jedd Fisch. So again, it's about, he's taking the right steps in that direction, but it's continuing to build on that and just trying to find more of that.
And the only way to do that, I mean, how can a guy that's about to take a different head coaching job or was considering taking a head coaching job, and certainly without question, beyond a shadow of a doubt, interviewed while on vacation with his wife for that job? I don't know. That might be kind of a hard sell to be like, hey, like I want to get all these alumni involved, but I'm also going to. I think you know where we're that was the segue. Yeah, we know where we're going now.
I was going to say, I know where we're going with that. We're going to a message from our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors does everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. So, Lars, with that being said, we do need to just put a bow on this, because we're not discussing it after this. The whole situation, as we discussed previously at length, almost too much length, really, on our Monday show, there was a rumor flying around from someone who we will not name. We are not going to run down this person, but somebody who said, "Oh, I heard from 3 different sources that Jedd Fisch interviewed for the UCLA job." There was a whole lot of speculation with somebody else saying, if anything, and they talked, it was a due diligence call. We came on here and we said, let's be real. There's no way he's taking this job. There's no way he truly interviewed for that job. Even if he picked up the phone and said, "No, I'm good," and hung up. Like that, if that's what happened, that's probably fine. So with that being said, Bruce Feldman, Jedd Fisch himself, and Jedd Fisch's agent all have decided to fire back. I don't know if that's the right term, but they've all decided to come out and say, yeah, no, that's not what happened. And of course, there's going to be the angle of course, that's what they're going to say. But on the other side of it, you can't really believe that this is what's going on.
Right. It's almost one of those. I mean, first of all, like Pete Thamel didn't touch it, right? Dennis Dodd didn't touch it, right? Yeah. Nobody that Matt Zennett with 247 didn't touch it. None of the people that, because to be fair, right, the other side of this coin is every now and then in our business that somebody maybe non-traditional is like, "Oh, wow, that guy was the first one that had the report of so-and-so," sure. And then everybody else confirming it. It's like, "Oh, no, there actually is truth to this." More often than not, and in this kind of situation, most people don't touch it because it's like, yeah, like I'm not like I am offering validity to this, or if I am in some way quote tweeting, if I even quote tweet and say, "Hey, this is not true," you're still clicking on that and amplifying that message, right? So it shouldn't take the agent, the coach, and a number of other people coming in and saying
Bruce Feldman himself,
being like, "Look, like this is not." I mean, like I remember John Wilner, for everybody that wants to say, what they want to about him, it's like he even was like, "Yeah, like, I just ignored it. Like it's not." There's no way, and especially when you look at who UCLA hired, Deshaun Foster, a former running back, former recent assistant coach at the school, that was always going to be a low cost, high reward, potential former alum type of hire. Jedd Fisch didn't check any of those boxes. Jedd Fisch had no tie-in to the, and there's always the, "Oh, hey, well, there's somebody picked up the phone." It's like, again, that's also the game telephone where, "Hey, I'm going to tell you Jedd Fisch called UCLA about a coaching position," and in turn, that translation is actually Jedd Fisch was kind of curious what it would take to get a Kaika Malloy to interview for his linebacker coaching position. Okay, now we're already getting down two phone calls down the road. It's, "Oh, hey, I heard Jedd Fisch was talking about like being interested in coaching there." So no, he was interested in a coach there, not. And so yeah. I'm not even saying that that's the case, but when even as a reporter, like when someone tells me something that is not public knowledge, and I'm like, "Oh, and I can run with this," it's like, wait a minute, what's the caveat here? Like, why is this getting out here? Like, what's the this to me doesn't make sense. So you're gonna have to explain it in order for me to run with it. Some people with a different vendetta or different agenda will say, "Oh, perfect. This is what I need. This is exactly up my alley. Let me just run with it." Because to me, there's no harm, right? If I put out something saying, "Oh, Kalen DeBoer is looking at becoming the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks," before Ryan Grubb was announced, right? Like, and just floating that out there as a way to get back at Kalen or throw him under the bus. That's irreparable harm. Like that's something that now again, fake fan accounts and Joe Schmo on Twitter can do it because it's Joe Schmo on Twitter. When you're an actual member of the media and you're putting out stuff that you either don't need to put out there or probably know is not true, but you can kind of spin it. If you have to put any form of spin on it, it's not worth putting out. You can say, "Hey, Jedd Fisch called UCLA. I don't know what it was about. Maybe Jedd's interested in the job. Maybe he's trying to get a coach off that staff. Who knows? All I can say is I heard that Jedd called UCLA." Fine. Because then you're not saying about the head coaching position or is interviewing. Because I think that's the other side of this coin. It's not just that, hey, he was interested, right? And it so happens that this is after another 247 sports site put out that I believe Brent Brennan, the new Arizona head coach, was looking at it. And it's like, okay, just because one did that doesn't mean you have to create the domino effect, right? You can just say, look, Brent Brennan already put out tweets and videos from the Waste Management saying he's not interested. I am not going to fan this and add somebody else's name, whether I can say so or not.
So, but that's the fact that we even had to get to that point is what's exhausting, because we had a fun conversation about it yesterday, but it shouldn't be getting to that point is the issue where we hear one thing. You and I are going to sit here and talk about what's going on, what's out there, what we're hearing, what we're seeing. That's what we're going to do. And that's just kind of the frustrating part of what we do sometimes with all these things. And when we look at just Jedd Fisch's situation here, he didn't have to put out any of those tweets yesterday like, "Oh, flying back to Seattle, doing this, doing that." It's very clear that he saw what was going on and just said, "All right, I have to say something. I can't stay silent about all this." But it's frustrating that it got to that point, because again, we're not going to name names, we're not going to do anything like that. But when you look at just some of the follow-ups to doubling down on what was said, a lot of that seemed to have a very targeted, "I don't like Jedd Fisch for this reason." But a lot of that seemed to just have a very just targeted, connotative view, where you and I have talked to Jedd Fisch twice now, right? We've had the introductory press conference with signing day press conference. It's somewhat hard to form an opinion about a person, but it's not even that's what we're doing. Our job is to report these facts.
Yep.
And if that person was legitimately called and said, "Hey, Jedd Fisch and UCLA spoke," and if that's all was said, and that person said Jedd Fisch interviewed at UCLA, I'm not surprised. That's just inappropriate. And that's just ridiculous more than it is anything else, because we don't want to have to sit on here, and because we love talking to the everydayers. We love doing the show. We love doing all that, but we don't want to spend time on these false rumors that get people frustrated and that people just have to continue doubling down on, saying, "No, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right." Because there are very particular ways that you can spin things. Like you said yesterday, just because they spoke, if they spoke, because we don't have any confirmation one way or the other. If any of that happened, you can't just say, "No, they interviewed. No, this is what happened. And I don't like this person, so this is how I'm going to talk about it." That's just ridiculous. And that crosses an ethics line. And just frankly unacceptable.
Right. I think that's, the difference where, you don't want to take any personal shots at people, but at the same point, if you're a credentialed member of the media and you're carrying yourself about in that regard, I kind of think all bets are off at that point. Like, I mean, I'm not a big fan of, burying somebody when they've already been, run over, but it's like, there's certain people that they will always have their views, and they will always have that. This is not any specific purpose. It's kind of just generalization of certain people will always kind of stick to their guns, even if they're dead wrong. Right. I mean, look, Skip Bayless, like I'll just say it. Skip Bayless, for example. We're not talking about him on this episode, but that's an example of, there's every evidence to the contrary that I'm wrong here, but you know what? I was right about that. I'm still right about that. He was wrong about that. And it's like, okay, like if you want to be delusional, go for it. But there's a difference between being delusional and then taking that delusion to the next level of reporting it. Like if you had just, texted a couple other people and, never put a tweet out, but maybe put something on a message board like, hey, I hear Jedd Fisch called UCLA. Okay, cool. Okay. Fine. You know what? Now you're trying to string it out for whatever. But when you put it out on Twitter and you're really making it to your point, it's like it's targeted, and that the same person has even put out tweets like, oh, well, Jedd lied to the media and so. It's like, okay, he's still not your friend. I mean, like there's people that I would consider friends that are coaches, but I also don't view it in the same of, oh, well, they're going to cater to me because we're friends. It's like, no, if you do, you do, you don't, you don't. Like, I'm not going to curtail my view of you. I'm not going to say, oh no, he's a great coach if your evidence is to the contrary, right? Like there's only so I might just not say anything. Right, which is kind of what I did in 21 with Scott Huff, where I'm like, hey, look, like there's a lot going on here. I'm not going to throw shade at Scott because I know Scott's not the problem, but let me just, let's take a step back here. So there's a difference between that and fueling an inaccurate flame that could potentially burn into a wildfire, because there is a point at which, the person would mention, oh, well, that's not liable. It's like, again, you still then kind of know what you're doing and trying to get away with it. And that's the whole point. Is it's like, we could say the same thing about Kalen. We could say the same thing about Jimmy. We could say the same thing about a number of coaches. If you're a member of the media and you're over the age of 21, like, how much of a child are you for doing that? Like that, to me, that's just like, it's so damaging. And if you're mad at him, okay, like it's whatever, like get over it. Like you could have a conversation with that person like a grown adult and be like, hey, this is where I view, you lied to Arizona fans, Jedd. You should apologize. Well, I'm at Washington now. Brent Brennan is at Arizona now. Same thing for Kalen. What if Kalen put out a 2-minute video on his Twitter page Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday afternoon saying, hey, Washington fans, sorry I didn't get to say goodbye. I just really, it's already too late. Just move on. Which is what we have done, even, other members of the media, where we don't expect Kalen to ever mention it. Maybe he might get asked about it at SEC Media Day over the summer, but that's pretty much it. Like, we're not continuing to harp on a story where, hey, he said he was going to be here forever, and then he bolted after the national championship. It's like, okay, it's a business. It's not TV football. It's a business.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I feel like that's a good place to put a bow on this one, because it's just, because we got some comments from some everyday. It's like, oh, well, you guys shouldn't have commented on this. We didn't want to see any of this brought to light. And well, at a certain point, some of this needed to be addressed from what we've heard and what we seem to understand that the truth of the matter is. Because
because here's the thing. Because here's the thing. If there actually was legitimate content, even if there wasn't more than anything than a 30-minute Zoom interview saying, hey, Jedd, would you be interested? Yeah, you know what? Sure. Let me see what you have to offer. And I'm not interested. Thanks. It's worth reporting then that he had a 30-minute Zoom call considering everything that he's doing. But because that wasn't the case, that isn't the case, and that was not what it actually was, that's why it has to be cleared up. Because we clear it up one way or the other. We got it confirmed that, hey, no, actually he did interview. He did legitimately spend an hour and a half or 2 hours over dinner kind of discussing philosophies. Okay, cool. You know what? Then maybe Jedd said, hey, thanks, but no thanks, but he did consider it. Well, okay, it's a head coaching position. Consider it, whatever. Sure. But that's just not the type of person Jedd is to do that legitimately after a month after taking another Power 5 job in the same conference in the Big Ten. It's not like Auburn fired their coach and then Jedd gets a call from Auburn saying, hey, you know what? Let's check this out. Okay, maybe do some due diligence, take an hour-long interview on Zoom, and then nah, I'm good at Washington. Thank you for the interest, but no. We can report on that because then that's tangible, right? Hey, Jedd may be not long-term for this job. That's a reportable news that you can work with. This wasn't that case, so it's actually fair to do the other side of that as well.
No, I agree with you there. And Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And, if you want to continue to make sure you keep up to date with everything that we'll be doing throughout the offseason, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit like on the video, leave us a comment down below if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review. It all really does help the show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Wednesday.